Good morning, church. That's a good song. That's a real good song. I was thinking back there, and I know I joke a lot, and I'm just a silly boy sometimes, but it is an honor to be able to speak to you guys. It's not something that I take lightly. I know I have a lighter demeanor, but it is honestly an honor to be able to talk about Jesus with you guys. And I thank you for that. I thank you that you're here. If you're listening online or if this is your first time, it's truly an honor. So thank you. If I haven't met you yet, my name is Mark. I'm the youth pastor here. And something pretty exciting is happening tonight. We are having a spaghetti feed for the youth group. And you are all invited. So that's our youth group. This is what we're doing. This is why we're doing it. So every summer, typically the second week of July, we do a serve camp. S-E-R-V, serve, not surf. Don't get too excited with that one. And I want to just brag about the youth group for a little bit because it is fascinating to me. These kids love it. Like, they genuinely enjoy showing up and serving. We serve for a total of 3 days. We do some families here within the church, and we also do local ministries like UGM, Samanka House, Hope Station, places like that. And it's not easy work, to be honest with you guys. By the end of those days of serving, they've done about 18 hours of serving. A lot of it is, quite honestly, the jobs not very many people want to do, which means like laying in the sun, pulling weeds for hours on end, or picking up trash for a long time. And they do a really, really good job of it. And this feed tonight that you are all invited to, will help lower the cost to be able to attend Serve Camp. It also gives scholarship to those students who may not be able to afford it. And it also allows us to bless the families that we help at. Sometimes it's nice to be able to buy more bark desks for the family or a couple of plants, things like that. So it is tonight here at the church from 5 to 7 p.m. There is a suggested $10 donation and $5 per kid. You'll come, you'll get fed, you get a little dessert. I'll share a little bit something, probably nothing you haven't already heard, and then you get to go on your way. So I would be so honored if you were able to come tonight, even if you were just to slip in. And if you can't afford that, that is totally fine. We would love to still serve you. So I hope to see you tonight at 5. The event is over at 7, but it's kind of an open house. Come when you can, leave when you can. So let me pray before I jump in. Get excited. I'm excited. Lord, again, thank you for this honor. Thank you for a time that we can come together as a church body, open up this word, and learn more about who you are. Especially in this Gospel of Mark, there is these beautiful invitations to participate in this relationship with you. Lord, I ask, even for conviction on my own heart, to continue to be a steward of this, to bring this word in a manner that your heart desires. Lord, thank you for this morning, and in your name, amen. Turn with me to Mark chapter 6, verse 45 through 52. Today, I'm going to be talking about Jesus walking on water. And then we are all going to go practice it after the sermon ends. It says this: immediately he made his disciples get into the boat and go before him to the other side, to Bethsaida, where he dismissed the crowd. And after he had taken leave of them, he went up on the mountain to pray. And when evening came, the boat was out on the sea, and he was alone on the land. And he saw that they were making headway painfully, for the wind was against them. At about the 4th watch of the night, he came to them walking on the sea. He meant to pass by them, but when they saw him walking on the sea, they thought it was a ghost and cried out, for they all saw him and were terrified. But immediately he spoke to them and said, "Take heart, it is I, do not be afraid." And he got into the boat with them, and the wind ceased. And they were utterly astounded, for they did not understand about the loaves, but their hearts were hardened. When I read this, when I got asked to speak again, I started to sit in this one, and I kind of got offered like, hey, here's your option within Mark. Which one would you like to speak on? And I was like, oh, Jesus walking on water. That's a great one. That's, it should be pretty applicable. You can go, Peter falls in the water and he needs help up. And I'm like, oh, like sign me up for that one. Absolutely. And then I went and sat down and started reading it, and I was like, oh no, Peter's not in this story. I had this whole vision for a message. You guys were going to be in tears. Baptisms were going to be overflowing. And I was like, Peter's nowhere to be found. And I was like, wait a minute. What am I missing here? Is this a different account? Is this just a completely different story? So if you're familiar with this story, you may be asking the same question. Where's Peter? If you're unfamiliar, the story somewhat goes, they're out, there's a storm, they see Jesus, and then he invites Peter out, and Peter is walking towards him, and then he starts to get scared, fear starts to creep in, he starts to sink, Jesus picks him back up, that whole bit. But there's no Peter. And honestly, I wasn't quite familiar until I reread this story to notice that Peter's not there. So bear with me, I'm going to nerd out for a little bit because I find this fascinating because there's a reason that Peter isn't in this story. This is the same account of Jesus walking on water with Peter in the Gospel of Matthew, if you're familiar with that story. This is the same story, but why does it not include Peter? So from the time Jesus ascended back into heaven until a thing called the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD, there were debates about Jesus' deity. Was he God? Was he not God? Was he part God? Was he a little bit of God and a lot of man? Was he a lot of man, a little God? We don't know. So they started debating, and this happened the moment Jesus ascended into heaven, like right after. And Mark wrote this gospel account, I think it was about 20, 30 years after Jesus had ascended into heaven. So he's very familiar with these debates. And when he wrote this gospel, he intentionally wrote it with a heavy focus on Jesus' deity. It was very intentional, these words that Mark wrote. So the same reason Peter isn't in the story is the same reason Jesus meant to pass by them in verse 48, which is another one of those things that sounds a little weird to me. I'm sure if Jesus really wanted to slip by them, he could have done it unnoticed. This is the Son of God. He could have turned into a merman and gone under the water. He could have floated above. I feel like there's a lot of options he could have done here. And so I don't think it was oops, I didn't know. I'm sure he was very aware. So I feel like there was some intentionality there. Bible scholars agree that Jesus intended to reveal his deity by walking past them so that they would see him and it would reaffirm his deity to them. But unfortunately, what happened to the disciples instead? Thank you, two of you. Come on, what happened? Were they woohoo? They were scared. They were scared when they saw him. So I think maybe something took place here that Jesus wasn't fully expecting. He was trying to reveal his deity, and instead they're like, oh no, there's a ghost. He's gonna get me. And so instead he goes over to them and he starts communicating and talking to them. And this, if you could bring up that last little bit of the passage, it also ended, in my opinion, kind of a little bit confusing. Verse 52, if we're able to bring that up. It says, and they were astounded, for they did not understand about the loaves, but their hearts were hardened. Again, I'm like, why are we talking about bread? We're talking about water and walking on, bless you, and walking on the water. And so the reason that this story and this verse is in there, right before the story happens, Jesus feeds the 5,000. That was another attempt for Jesus to reveal his deity to his disciples. And it didn't work. And so he does this. I'm going to try to slip by them so they can see, oh my goodness, this man has authority over nature. This must be the Son of God. Again, unfortunately, it doesn't work. So if you were questioning, why isn't Peter in this? Hopefully that makes a little bit more sense because I was also a bit confused. The second thing I noticed in this passage is if I was a disciple, I'd probably want Jesus to show up a bit differently than looking like a ghost. A little bit, like I would have been, and maybe this was their eyes were playing tricks on them. Maybe they just weren't expecting to see someone walking on water at 6 a.m. I probably wouldn't be either. But I was thinking, honestly, this is the Son of God. How nice would it have been for Jesus to show up appearing to them like himself and just like pull the boat across the water real quick. Just like super speed, walk across, like they're on the dry land, it's nice, it's comfortable again. And if I was in the middle of a storm, again, by the way, if you're familiar with Josh's sermon he gave a few weeks ago, it was another time when they were in a boat and they were scared. So they're very familiar with the situation, and they probably were expecting Jesus to show up a certain way. They would want to get to land as quick as possible. But instead, Jesus showed up in an unexpected way. I can't help but to think they were expecting Jesus to show up in a certain manner, to already be on the boat. They've gone through this before, but Jesus isn't anywhere to be seen. I'm curious, has any of us or any of you had an experience where someone or something doesn't show up the way you expect it to? Okay, 4 of us. That's fine. I'm so sorry. I'm so used to the youth who are just like running up to me mid-sermon and they're like, I need a Bible. I'm like, okay, so I apologize. I'm used to that. I would love to share a story with you guys about when something showed up unexpected to me in a manner I was not prepared for. So I love adventures. I love going to new places and experiencing new things. And quite honestly, I enjoy, this may sound really silly, I enjoy going into things where I'm not fully prepared for it. Like knowing things could go a little haywire, but it'll be a little fun. It'll be a little adventure. I grew up in Boy Scouts. Anybody familiar with their motto? Be prepared. I took that and I said, nah, that's not fun. I don't want to be prepared. I want to be unprepared. I wasn't the best Boy Scout, but it was fun. But it's really bitten me in the butt when I have to rely on someone else to come save me. If I can get myself out of the situation, things are perfect. The moment somebody has to come in, then we have some issues, I feel bad, so on and so forth. So I kind of like to go in a little bit unprepared and just kind of see what happens. And before any of you start to write worry notes about my children, are they safe? Yes, they are warm, they wear socks, and they are well fed. So there we go. A few years ago, before my wife Erica and I had kids, we were going to go up to a cabin in the middle of nowhere. And when I say middle of nowhere, I mean middle of nowhere. This is like 2.5 hours on paved roads and about hour and a half on dirt roads. There was no cell service and there was barely any houses along this dirt road. And this cabin, to give, maybe this was helpful, is on the east side of Mount Hood. So we're driving on this dirt road and it's hot outside. It's maybe 85 degrees. And at this time, I had a little S15 GMC truck, had 2 doors. One of the doors didn't work. Windshield wipers weren't working. It was honestly one of my favorite trucks. Times are great, though. We're blasting music, we're giggling, we're having a good time. And all of a sudden, I'm driving and I'm looking at my temperature gauge, and I'm just climbing. It's hot out, and I'm like, there's a gauge that's just keeps moving up. It's my engine temperature gauge. I'm like, oh, well, that's probably not good. So I put a little sticky note to cover it so I don't have to think about it. And I just keep on driving. And Erica's like, is everything good? I'm like, yeah, it's fine. I can't see it anymore. It's not a problem. So I keep driving. And then about 10 minutes go by and I'm spewing fluids everywhere. And it's my car's, I'm just completely overheated on the side of the road, middle of nowhere, no cell service. And I'm old enough to know, or I know enough to know, that I need fluids. Preferably coolant would be best, but even water, and sometimes there's a third option, but we won't go there. And I started to look through our supplies, and I had some water, but not a whole lot of water. And so very quickly I realized I need help, and I can't call anyone, so I'm just gonna have to start walking. So I start walking, and I'm probably walking a good 15, 20 minutes, and I am starting to see something. To the right, it looks like a driveway. And I'm like, oh, this is perfect. So I walk up to the driveway, and I'm looking at this driveway. It's a long driveway. There's these big trees that are just lining it. And it is just filled with signs about no trespassing, we don't call 911, and a whole bunch of other very serious threats that I was just shaking in my boots. My timbers were shivered, and I was just like, I don't have an option here. We are completely stuck. So I start walking down, and I get probably 50 yards down, and probably 10 to 15 dogs just start erupt barking. I was like, oh no, this is where it ends. And I'm terrified. And I'm walking down, and there's just more signs with all these threats, and I'm just like, I'm so sorry. And I'm just like waving, pretending there's cameras watching me, trying to be nice. And I start to see this big, barn, and I'm looking at it, and I'm like, oh, I have to go up to that. And all of a sudden, this man seems to appear out of the bushes, just out of nowhere. Jean cutoffs, which I'm not bashing. I wore my pair yesterday. Cutoffs, like this big old Gandalf beard, kind of scraggly looking, and I was like, this is where it happens. This is it. I left Eric in the car. I don't know if that was why. Friendliest handshake and hug. He goes, folks around here call me Beagle. What can I do for you? And I was like, and I explained it. He's like, oh, fantastic. I just picked some apples. Would you like some? And here's some water. I was like, what? Okay. Long story short, he helped me more than I even needed. He sent me on my way with like 6 Honeycrisp apples that he just got from his garden. He invited me into his house, and he sent me on my way with plenty of water for the drive to the cabin. When we need help, we often have a very specific or a pretty specific idea of how we want to receive that help. For me, it honestly didn't include a man named Beagle, who I think just popped up out of the bushes. That's not what I had in mind. But sometimes we don't always see where God is moving in our life. Sometimes these things are very unexpected. Just like the disciples most likely didn't expect Jesus to show up in this manner, we get an invitation to stop and see where God is moving in our life. There are so many times throughout my life I'm begging God to show up and save me from my troubles. Similarly, I'm sure, to the disciples in that storm. And it feels like nothing happens. Seems like he's nowhere to be seen. Feels like I'm completely alone. Shortly after, though, with a bit more clarity in my brain, I start to see things that I didn't quite see when those times were tough. I'll look back and remember even some of the kind words you guys have said to me, or a nice letter a student wrote me. When I was in college, I was instructed by my professor to keep a folder of all the encouragements that I have received. And I started that right when I started here. So if you have ever written me an encouraging letter, I still have it. Or if you wrote me an email, I printed it and I have it. And often I'll look back, and even this morning I was just flipping through them, and some of them are back when I started in around 2015, and I can't help but to think, man, God did show up. I may not have expected him to show up in the manner, or not how I prayed for him to show up, but he did. But it often looks different than we think it does. Often I'm praying that God will show up with $1 million in hand and 100 acres for me somewhere out in the middle of nowhere, and that hasn't happened yet. I'm just putting that out there, so maybe he needed to hear it again. It looks different, but he does often show up. When the disciples first saw Jesus, they were terrified, as honestly I probably would be as well. I don't think this necessarily means we should look throughout our lives for when we were terrified to see where God did something, but it could look like a friend sending an encouragement text or note or email, or a day or even a couple of minutes where the kids aren't fighting, healing a blind man. In this story, Jesus spits on the man's eyes and then laid his hands on him. Often when Jesus shows up in people's lives to heal them or even be with them, he does it in different ways. This is one of the few times that Jesus healed someone with his spit. Each time he heals, it may be a little bit different than the time before. And I heard it said that if Jesus healed everybody the same way, by spitting on them, someone would make a school out of it. The correct way to spit on someone. How to really spit to heal. And I'm thankful that Jesus didn't heal that in only that manner. Perhaps something that Scripture is getting at through these stories of Jesus showing up is that his relationships are deeply relational. It's not the same every time. He interacts differently because we are different. So here's a way of looking at it that has helped me, in that there was a man who lived in a house, or a woman, or whoever, living in a house. And the neighbor wants to go and welcome this friend to the neighborhood. So he goes over one day, and the man is standing in the window. He goes over, introduces himself, says, "Hi, I'm Dwayne. How are you doing?" And the man's like, "Oh, I'm good." And they start talking. The next day, the man comes back to see the neighbor, and the neighbor is now in a different window. "Oh, hey, how are you doing?" They chat for a while, talk about the weather, all the good stuff. Next day comes back, and the man is in a different window. And this routine continues for a few months. Each time he comes, he's kind of in a different position in the house. A few months go by, and all of a sudden, the neighbor shows up, and the door is boarded up. He goes, "Huh, all right, that's fine. I'm going to talk to you where you're at. You're up there? I'll talk to you up there." A few months of this go by. The door's boarded up, not sure what's going on, but it's boarded up. And then he comes back a few months later, and now that window's boarded up. "All right, that's fine. I'm going to talk to you through that window. I want to connect. I want to chat." A few months later, comes again, and now that window's boarded up. Finally, the man in the window asks, why do you only talk to me through this window? Why are you only chatting me through this window?" And the man's like, this is the only window that you don't have boarded up. This is the only way I can talk to you. And perhaps, Jesus speaks to us the way we need him to, or even restricted him to. Let's look at two stories of Jesus and a storm. This is the same story that Josh spoke on a few weeks ago. The story of Jesus calming the storm. Both instances, Jesus calmed the storm. So here are the references. Jesus calms the storm and Jesus walks on water. Both times, there is a storm. Both of them. Both times, the disciples are scared. And then the ending is where it's a little bit different. And often, the biblical writers would write these stories intentionally with those little differences. Hopefully, we'd be able to pick up on them. One of them is that Jesus is already there. The other one is that Jesus shows up. This isn't their first time on a boat. This isn't their first time on a boat being scared on a boat. But this is, as far as we know, the first time Jesus isn't already on the boat. He's nowhere to be seen. And I'd probably be a little nervous this time too. Jesus shows up differently in these two stories, but the bottom line is that he shows up. Jesus meets us where we're at, where we need. As I said, it can look different. There are seasons in my life where he's a God of wonder. And each time I open the Bible, I feel like I'm finding something new, and I have more questions and more and more. And it's just this divine mystery, and it's beautiful. There are other times where it's the simple gospel. I spoke on that a few weeks ago. And those seasons, there are seasons where I need that simple gospel. And other times it's the season where I need the intricacies of who he is, of learning. He's shown up in a friend. He's shown up in coworkers. He's shown up in strangers or family members. And I want to invite you all to stop for a moment and to think. Remember back to those trials, or maybe you're in it now, those difficult times, the times where maybe you're just filled with anger towards someone or hurt. You're going through something tough in your family. I want to invite you to maybe take a step back and to say, where is God moving here? Where is he active? It may not be where we expect it to be. Maybe in a different manner than we expect it to be. How has Jesus interacted with you? What's a time in your life where he has shown up in a manner you weren't expecting? But he did show up. I'm going to pray. A couple elders are going to come up and lead us in a meeting. But I want us to really sit for a minute and just to think. Where could it have been? Where was he? Was it in a spouse saying a kind word or doing something above and beyond? Was it an encouragement letter that you can look back and pull out and read? Maybe it was a peaceful walk. Lord, thank you for these stories as you interact with your disciples and as you interact with the crowds and the brokenhearted, the religious elites, the mothers, the fathers, the children, and how you interacted with them was so personal. It was what they needed when they needed it. You didn't show up to the widow the same way you showed up to the Sadducee. You showed up differently. So, Lord, I ask that you lead us in looking at our own lives, maybe taking a step back and saying, where are you moving? Where have you moved? And to just enjoy that you are an active God, that you're a personal God, and that you're a deeply relational God. In your name, amen. I want to dismiss those who are watching online. Thank you for watching.